So last week we started the topic of hijab, well, 2 weeks ago, and we went quite deep into it. I probably should have spread it over two sessions rather than one. I felt that later on maybe I'd put a bit too much into the first one, but nonetheless it was done, and the recording's available, so I can post the recording in the group. So if anybody hasn't listened to it, they can listen to the first session, probably listen to half of it, take a break, and then listen to another half. So anyway, so last time when we talked about the hijab, we talked about how Islam wants to protect our purity, and we also learned how Islam wants to protect our privacy, and we talked about seeking permission to go to someone's house, to go into someone's room, and also what are the Islamic ways of, for example, visiting people's houses, and how long should you stay and when should you leave. So we talked about that last time. This week, my intention is to talk about the real life application of hijab. So how hijab and behavior, what is the purpose of them, and how to do it, and that it's here. Hijab, the actual purpose of hijab is for the safety of women. So the purpose of hijab, and again, hijab is a big topic, it's not just a headscarf, but the purpose of hijab, actually, when we read the verses of the Qur'an, like we did last week, we done one verse, this week we'll do one verse, and there are many more verses for us to do. We start to learn that the purpose behind it is to keep us pure and to protect us, in particular, especially for women. So maybe just a quick couple of questions, and you can put an answer in the chat if you can remember. Can you remember what the reason was that that verse that we done last week about hijab? Can you remember what any of the reasons were of why that verse was revealed, or what the background to it was? I'll just give a minute, see if anything comes up. I just want to get you just to think. Or if you can remember who had this idea of hijab before it was revealed. I'm just going to check. So there's nothing in the chat, so I'll just answer. So the reason that the hijab was revealed was for purity, to protect the purity of our hearts, men and women, both. So that was the reason that was mentioned in the verse that we went over last week. The person who mentioned it before it was revealed by Allah, his name was Umar. May Allah be pleased with him. He was the second person to be in charge of the Muslims after the Prophet passed away. So that's just to kind of get the mind thinking. So we also covered last week a term called mahram. Now, mahram are those people of the opposite gender to us that we have to observe hijab in front of. Okay? So for a woman, her mahram, or sorry, the mahram are the people you don't have to put hijab on in front of, and they're from the opposite gender. So for example, women, generally you don't have to do hijab in front of most women. You don't have to do hijab. But when it comes to men, who do you not have to do hijab in front of? You don't have to do hijab in front of your dad, or your grandfather, or your son, or your grandson, or your son-in-law. Yeah, you don't have to do hijab in front of your nephew or your uncles. Yeah, these are all people, even your father-in-law, you don't have to do hijab in front of all of those people. Anyone else other than that, any men, you're supposed to do hijab in front of them, except your husband, obviously, because you wouldn't do hijab in front of your husband. So what that means is all those people that you don't have to do hijab in front of, they're known as your mahram. And anybody other than that, they're not your mahram. So for a man, then it's the opposite. For a man, for example, his mother, his grandmother, his daughter, his granddaughter, his niece, his aunties, his mother-in-law, his daughter-in-law, all of them and his wife, they're all mahram. They don't have to do hijab in front of him. But any other woman, then that would be the case that they would have to do hijab in front of them. And there are rules for men what they have to do with regards to those other women that we'll maybe cover in a future session. So in this verse of the Qur'an, which is here in front of us right now, this is to this week's session. It mentions, O wives of the Prophet, you are not like any other woman. If you observe taqwa, so do not be soft in your speech, lest someone having disease in his heart should develop fancies. And do speak with appropriate words, and remain in your homes, and do not display beauty as it used to be displayed in the days of earlier ignorance, and establish salah and pay zakah and obey Allah and His Messenger. Allah only intends to keep filth away from you, O members of the family, meaning of the Prophet, and to make you pure through a perfect purification. And be mindful of Allah's verses and the wisdom that is recited in your homes. Surely Allah is all kind, all aware. So in this verse of the Quran, there are many things that we are taught which relate to hijab. And one of them that's mentioned here is that, O wives of the Prophet, you are not like any other woman if you observe taqwa. So it's telling the wives of the Prophet that obviously they're the Prophet's wives, so they should be making even more effort to be even better Muslims than other women because they're living with the Prophet. So taqwa means to fear God, to remember God, to be aware of God, to be a righteous person. That's all contained within that word. So what they're now being taught is something that's not just for those women, but it's for all women. When they're talking to a man who is not their mahram, meaning a man who they should be observing hijab in front of, then it's telling us how we should speak to those men, how women should speak to those men. So do not be too soft in your speech, lest someone having disease in his heart should develop fancies about you. So what does this mean? This means that when a woman has to speak to a man who is one of those men that she has to observe hijab with, then she should speak clearly to the man, meaning that there has to be a reason, like a need. Generally, men and women, we shouldn't talk to one another, meaning socially. Unless it's our family, that's fine, or if it's a husband or a wife, that's fine. But what I mean is for those people who are not our mahram, yeah? Those who are just like random man that you might be working with or someone on the street, randomly just to talk to them for no reason. How are you? Are you okay? How's your day going? Tell me a bit about you. We're not supposed to do that. So what it's saying is that when you do have to talk to them because there's a reason, so for example, you go to the shop, you need to talk to the person at the shop, or you're at work and you need to talk to someone about some work, then in those situations, or for example, right now, we're talking to each other because we're learning. So there's a reason to talk. So what you do is don't be too soft in your speech, meaning don't let the speech be so soft that it sounds sweet to the person that's listening. So to some men, the sweetness of a woman's voice when she speaks very sweetly, that then gives him the wrong idea. So women are being told that when you speak to those men, meaning the ones that are not your mahram, then don't be too soft. Speak to them very kind of professionally, very clearly, not with a soft tone. Lest someone having disease in his heart should develop fancies about you. Because if you don't do that, then what happens is some men, they might be okay, but other men, they might get the wrong impression and they might think, oh, maybe she likes me. So rather than have that, just speak clearly. and do speak with appropriate words. And then it goes on to say that, and remain in your homes, and do not display your beauty as it used to be displayed in the days of early ignorance. So what is this talking about? So what this is talking about is that, like we mentioned last week, we were talking about the a woman, a wife of the Prophet, peace upon him, being asked a question, and the men were told that when you go to speak to them, then make sure there's a curtain between you so that you don't see those women and you can ask them a question. And obviously the women would then be covered because they're behind a curtain and they're in their house. So what it's mentioning here is that to women is remain in your homes, meaning that in a woman, when she's in her home, she obviously doesn't have to wear hijab because there are no men there that she has to do hijab in front of. So in that case, it's saying that basically try and spend most of your time in your home. And do not display your beauty as it used to be displayed in the days of early ignorance. So what this means is that when you have to go out, so for example, people have to go out either because they need fresh air, they need to go shopping, they need to go to the doctors, they need to visit someone, they're going to the mosque, they might be going to work, they might be going to school, various reasons why people leave their house. So what it's saying is when you leave your house, do not display your beauty as it used to be displayed in the days of early ignorance. So what this is saying is that the early ignorance was the time before Islam, before the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him's time, when the people were not Muslim yet. Those women at that time, when they used to go out, they used to make themselves look beautiful when they were going out of their house. So Islam came to say that, okay, when you need to go out of your house, no problem, but don't display your beauty. Now, does this mean that a woman should not beautify herself? No, it doesn't. That's part of being a woman, is that women like to beautify themselves. And Islam is not against that. That's fine. And even in circumstances where a woman is married, it's encouraged, make yourself even more beautiful when you run about your husband. But what it's saying, so when you run about other women, it's not a problem. When you run about your mahram, male relatives, it's not a problem. But when you're around men that are not your mahram, then don't let them see that beauty. So cover it up. Or when you're going out, don't display that. And there's a way of not displaying it that we'll cover. So I think if I go on to the next slide, it might explain it a little bit. Okay. Okay, so this is just emphasizing that the reason for these rules, and the reason that Allah is telling is to protect women. Because there are men out there that are not right, and therefore to protect yourself, it's better to, they say prevention is better than cure. So that's one of the things. So here it's mentioned that, when we talked about the voice, it said that, like the woman's voice when she's talking to a man who's not her mahram, don't make it soft. Just speak normally the way like I'm talking right now. Just speak like that very clearly. So some people might think that the woman's voice shouldn't be heard, but that's not the case. Women, it's okay for them to speak and to be heard by others. It's just that the manner in which they do it should not give the wrong impression. That's all that it means here. And even, when women, they worship Allah, when they read Qur'an and they're doing their prayers and stuff like that, even when they go for Hajj, for example, they're saying, labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, and stuff like that. In Islam, they're always told, women are told, say it quietly. But whereas for men, in many cases, they're told to say it loud. And again, it's for that reason, that a woman's voice sometimes, because women are naturally, their voice is feminine, and some men are attracted to that. It's like, look, just keep your voice down. So an example of that is when people are praying in the mosque and the imam, he makes a mistake. And what happens is the men behind him will say, Subhanallah. to remind him that he's made a mistake, because you're not allowed to speak when you're praying. But if a woman recognizes that the man has made a mistake, she doesn't say Subhanallah. What she does is she takes one of her hands, her right hand, and she slaps the top of her left hand like this. So it makes a sound. So when the women are doing this, then the Imam remembers, okay, I've made a mistake, and he corrects himself. So even in prayer, women have been told not to raise their, what's it called, voices. So this is the bit I wanted to talk to you about, and then we'll finish after this. So the instruction that's given in this verse about when a woman has to go out not to show her beauty. So how is this done? So this is talking about full hijab. So full hijab, some people call it parda or a veil. Someone might call it a burqa. Different names in different languages. It's called a jilbab as well. In Arabic, the word that's used is jilbab. So when the verse was revealed saying, and remain in your homes and do not display your beauty as it used to be displayed in the days of early ignorance, here the expression, the days of early ignorance, means the jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah means ignorance, which prevailed in the world before Islam. Embedded in this expression is the hint that later than it there is to come yet another period where people will be ignorant, and in which a similar display of this type of behaviour will happen, where women will go out beautified in front of other men, and they will not cover their bodies, and this will become widespread, like we see today in the world. That's probably what it's referring to in our modern time. So in this verse, the rule that's been given about hijab is that, like I mentioned, best thing is women going to spend most of the time probably at home anyway. But when they do need to go out in public, then they shouldn't do it the way that the people in Jahiliyyah done it. So they should do it the way that Allah has taught in the Qur'an. So a word that's used in Arabic is tabarruj. Tabarruj means to display, yeah, and meaning to display the beauty of a woman, you know, in front of a man who's not her mahram. Okay, it's mentioned in another verse that not displaying their adornments, and we'll cover that verse in the future, inshallah. So for women, the real thing is that obviously they're in their houses, then there's no hijab, there's no problem. If anybody needs to speak to them, they can speak behind a door or on a phone or a buzzer. There's no need for them to see the women, meaning those men who are not supposed to see that woman. And when they need to go out of the house, then they do it in a way which means that they're covered up. Okay. So how is that done? So what it's done is that instead, the woman, when she's going out, she should wear what covers her whole body. So like in Afghanistan and some places in Pakistan, they wear a burqa. In Arab countries, they wear what's known as a jilbab. So what are these things? Basically, it's clothing that is so loose that you cannot see the shape of the woman's body. And it's not see-through, so you cannot see the body beneath the clothing. And that's what it's referring to. And so it includes the whole of the body, including the hair and the head, the neck, but it doesn't include the face and the hands, and even the feet, because obviously those things need to be exposed to be able to go about and do things. But everything else is supposed to be covered. And like I said, this is only when they're in public in front of men that are not their mahram. There's not expected, like, so someone asked, a person once asked in work, there was a woman wearing hijab, and someone asked her, that, do you wear that when you go to sleep? They didn't realise that she's only wearing it at work because there's other men around, but obviously when she goes home, she doesn't wear the scarf. And similarly, women that are Muslim will already know that themselves, that you don't wear the scarf all the time. So, and do not display your beauty. Within this verse, that going out as needed is not prohibited. So someone might think because of this verse of Quran, this means women shouldn't go out. That's not what it means. What it means is that don't go out in a manner in which you're displaying your beauty. Okay? So what it says in a verse of the Quran, another verse, is bring down over themselves part of their outer garment. Okay? This injunction is itself telling us that to a certain degree, women have to go. They have to go out. Yeah. So they've got permission from God to go out. But they go out in the way that they've been told to dress as a Muslim. And here the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there are examples when his own wives used to go out. So for example, they went out to visit the mosque, they went for Hajj, they went for Umrah, they went to visit the sick, they went to visit their parents, they went to give condolences when someone died. So obviously they didn't sit in the house and not go out. They went out when they needed to, but they went out dressed appropriately. And because of that, that was fine. And yeah, this is kind of the end of today's session, and inshallah we will continue with the next part next time, inshallah. So